Welcome back to Leadership Roundtable. This week's edition is going to be dedicated to the engineering leadership industry specifically. However, if you're not an engineer, it doesn't mean you won't take anything out of this, because it turns out leadership really boils down to a couple simple factors. Depending on who you ask, I think two of those factors are going to be trust and communication. But hopefully today we're going to talk about a whole bunch of other things that if you are an up and coming engineer and you have a desire to land in a leadership role, I think two of my guests today specifically might be able to shed some light on that. So with that, I'll start with introductions, and I usually make Mike go last. So this time I'm gonna let Mike go first.
How you doing? Mike Donito. I'm a director of a large mental health program here in New York City, as well as a psychotherapist.
All right, thanks, Mike. Cullen, would you lead us off from the East Coast?
Sure. My name's Cullen O'Connor. I've pretty broad range of experience in engineering. I've bounced back and forth several times between mechanical engineering and systems engineering, from the consumer appliance world to the DoD world to the NASA world, on projects ranging everything from internal research and development stuff all the way to putting them into production, into end of life, and kind of closing things out. And so I look forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Colin. I appreciate that. And for those watching, I will point out that if you're in the market for a well-versed engineer, Colin is at your service. Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Alan Hoffman. I been oh my gosh, almost 30 years now. I can't believe that. In engineering of some sort, either as an engineer, individual contributor, team lead, manager, and currently in program management more specifically. Most of my career has been in automotive, but I've had a stint where I was doing residential HVAC controls, and also I'm currently my first foray into the DoD contractor world. So lots of stuff.
Oh, that's pretty. I was going to say it's pretty exciting because Colin just wrapped up a stint with, it was NASA, correct, Colin?
Yeah, I was on NASA's Mars sample return mission, and with all of the budget stuff, they canceled the contract I was on. But we'll see. Maybe they'll bring us back.
Yeah.
Well, John will appreciate this, that the contract that I'm currently with is with the Detroit Arsenal, specifically with the ground vehicle group, and which is all Army. So,
yeah. Well, as we work through the introductions of this, I will point out Mike also served in the Army. A little bit of a deeper resume than I have. Mike was infantry, and then transitioned over to do some what I consider some pretty cool work with helping the Iraqi people after all of the war took place. Go ahead, Mike.
Afghanistan.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
No, I was civil affairs.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. I got to see pictures of Mike handing out candy to the kids over there. So anyway, we could probably talk for hours about that. So Al, you had briefly led into some of your experiences, and I know it's crazy to say, we are now at that point where we have been professionals for 30 years. But so the purpose of this show is we want to really talk about the progression for leaders in general, but specifically an engineer coming up through the ranks. And Colin and I have touched base several times on the path for an engineer to kind of walk through that door of leadership. And so Al, you and I had talked not on a show before about your path through leadership, your journey through leadership. And I just want to kind of kick it off with, can you, I'm not sure if you can remember back that far, but if you could, to talk us through what did that journey look like for you when you got your first opportunity to launch into leadership as an engineer?
Well, back in my day, no, yeah, no. I mean, yeah, I started. I mean, most of my career. I mean, so I by degree, I have I'm an electrical engineer, graduated from Western Michigan University, and then I got an engineering management degree from Oakland University, or for as my master's. So I'd always kind of been looking at it from the standpoint of, okay, what do I need to do to get to that next level? And I've had some setbacks and some step forwards, but realistically, from my standpoint, started off like everybody else does. You start off as an individual contributor. You're going out, you're doing the work, you're doing the legwork, you're doing the grunt work, from my standpoint, it was doing a lot of requirements work, working with suppliers, all of that fun stuff. And then from there, it just kind of grew into, okay, now, okay, as being a part of a project, to then going in and showing my ability to lead a project, not necessarily as a project lead, but like doing, for me, it's like my first foray into that was really, I was going for my what's called Design for Six Sigma, or DFSS. I was going for my green belt, and then I actually ended up getting my black belt back when I worked at GM. And really there, it was more leading from the standpoint of, trying to develop a product and designing in engineering quality. Is basically what DFSS is about. And that was really, and again, I'm still an individual contributor at that point, but really stepped up into, a leader type role where, I'm like working with a team. And then when I was successful with that, then it was more leading a development of, a small project where, again, as an individual contributor, working with suppliers, developing a backup battery for a telematics unit. And then from there, it was, an opportunity where, and I will honestly say it is very unusual that I left GM, even though I was leading projects, but I wasn't a team lead. And then when I went to my next job is where I actually got hired in as a team leader, which, and so that was my first real, experience with, truly being responsible for a team and a deliverable all the way into production. From there, I continued on, and I kind of hit a wall there at that company, and actually left the automotive industry and moved to Texas for a few years. Actually, and again, as an unusual step, is hiring in as an engineering manager. But then life got in the way with having our second kid. We had our first kid when I was at the last company, had our second kid when we were down in Texas. It's like, okay, we're too far away from family. So we ended up moving back to Michigan. And so when I did that, I unfortunately, I took another manager role, but I didn't do my due diligence with that. So I quickly left that company. And actually took a step back and became more of an individual contributor, team leader type role again, and was kind of stuck in that rut for a little while as a team, still a team lead, trying to help in developing things, kind of progressively work through some aspects. There was a startup that I was labeled as a chief engineer, but it was really more of a manager role. So I did get back into that. But again, they were a startup, past tense. They went bankrupt. And so again, I took another step back, was kind of stuck in another rut. And then, with the latest opportunity that I'm in now, I'm still more of an individual contributor lead type role. But right now, with where everything's going, there's a lot of potential growth again to, kind of get myself forward. So, yeah, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster for me. Some things, places I made mistakes along the way, and where I probably, I was probably too quick to jump into something just because from a family perspective, or from, just maybe frustrated with where I was at. But, finally to a point where I'm really happy with where I'm at in the trajectory, and looking back on everything I've done, I don't think I would be where I am today if it wasn't for all of those steps along the way to get here.
Yeah, so a couple things you mentioned, and I'm curious on Colin's opinion on this as well. So the unusual step of transitioning from a company to a company and taking on a leadership role, that those are tough opportunities to come by.
Yep.
But if I heard you correctly, in your individual contributor opportunities, it sounded like you took the opportunity to be the leader of the project, to be kind of a standout on that. Do you think that that contributed to your ability to make that transition?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And even in going into the interviews and things like that, I always would, for that next opportunity, I would always sell up those times when I was the team leader as an individual contributor to highlight, okay, yes, when you look at my resume and you look at what's on paper, it's not necessarily, I'm not necessarily, an engineering manager, but here's all the things that I've done that qualify me to be one. And a lot of times that has helped really, assuming you can actually get the interview and not, get shut down, early on in the process just through the normal weeding processes that happen nowadays. Usually once I get to the point where I can actually talk to somebody and explain my capabilities, usually the conversation goes really well and they understand the skills that I'm bringing to the table.
Okay. Yeah, before I hand the mic over to Colin, the other thing you pointed out, and it was something when I talk to younger professionals, one of the things that I tell them is you do kind of have to start with the end in mind. And as you talked about, then I saw Mike smile when you talked about your the different belts that you've earned, because Mike and I have talked about this in another show, and I want to get back to some of these resources, but beginning with the end in mind, to be able to keep track of these projects and have a portfolio to be able to say, here's what I've done, here's how I've contributed, but then also to earn the certificates along the way. Colin, you one of the things the two of you, I've talked to you about this, I know privately, but also publicly in some cases, these projects that you've worked on, and I know Alan's heard me go off about this multiple times. I think it's unique, the position that you're in as an engineer, that I don't think a lot of the general population realizes. We look at the public servants who are heroes, firemen, police officers, military, and we say, man, we're so grateful for what they do. But I step back and I look at guys like the two of you, and I say, because of some of the things you've done, people are alive today. The technology that you've worked on with automobiles, Colin, you talked about, the washer and dryer experience that you had. I believe it was here in Michigan. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. So I worked at Whirlpool, which is out of Benton Harbor.
Okay. And so, I look at those contributions and think, those to me are history changing type of, product enhancements. And, and I take it back to this whole portfolio of being able to say, here are the projects that I've worked on. And, Colin, with your experience, you most recently with NASA, but I know you've got a ton of corporate experience as well. What are some of the things that you have found to help you be most successful in that path to become an engineering leader?
It can be difficult because of so much of my background is DoD. I can point to the front-facing part of the projects, but a lot of times there's details that I just can't get into. Like it's either proprietary, trade secret, or in some cases classified. I cannot share what I did outside of a high level. So it can get tricky to play around with presenting those as a leadership in a leadership capacity. But really, a lot of what you're trying to do. And it depends. I want to clarify something real quick too, in that leadership is not just management, right? You do have leadership in management, or you're, driving the projects forward and stuff like that. But in engineering, you also have technical leadership. A lot of places struggle to differentiate these two, and even the ones that do, the technical leaders tend to need a whole lot more experience to get to the same level, which is probably behind some of the push that you're getting for people to move into that. But if you're trying to get into the leadership positions, some of the first things that you can do is start taking that technical leadership, and you can show, like, hey, I had this program, I was working on this program. We went into testing, it failed. This is what I did. This is how I contributed and got it to a point where it passed the testing, right? Or, I was able to verify the requirements. Those can be very powerful stories, even if you can't get into the specifics. Because so a lot of my background is simulation, finite element analysis, that kind of stuff, basically making a computer model to say whether or not something's going to work. And so, like, being able to bring those skills in, and some people are like, oh, well, you just do that way up in the front, and if it works, great, whatever. But being able to say, hey, these analysis tools allow me to build in to make these projects successful. And I was, pushing for their use, and I was showing how these things connect. All of those are very technical leadership skills that when you're, in those interviews, when you're trying to make that case, it becomes much easier if you say, hey, I'm bringing the technical expertise to make the project successful. Or, hey, I'm bringing in the people that we need to in order to make the project successful. Those can be very crucial stories in order to show your background and capabilities, even when you can't dive into the specifics.
Yeah, I think that's great. Go ahead. Were you going to talk, Mike?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to use this as more of like me interviewing the two of you. I don't know much about the engineering. So, I mean, like, some of my past experiences, and I've talked about it on the show, is like leading from within is a peer level type of thing. And what I hear a lot of, and I want to take a look at it, is like, okay, I'm the bottom man on the rung. How can I start moving up? What I'm hearing a lot of is individual leaders and things of that nature. What are some of the ways that, not being in a leadership role or a leadership capacity, I'm, maybe the guy that's been on the team for 2 years, fresh out of college, is there ways that you can take on additional responsibilities? And like, what are some of those ways? So I'll give you an example for like my field. I'm human services, right? Like reviewing my notes or setting up stuff like tracking for the supervisor to help the supervisor make sure we're in compliance. Like, those are some of the ways that I've been able to take on a little bit of leadership roles to prove myself. Is there anything like industry specific, or maybe examples of stuff you guys have done?
So I'll go ahead and kick this off, I guess, is one of the big things you can do is gap analysis, right? Look for what's not being covered. Look what, you might have done a project in, and how you can bring, how you can tap that experience and make it relevant to what you're doing. There are a lot of different analysis techniques. Engineering as a whole is just incredibly broad. Even mechanical engineering, I regularly joke that, when I say I'm a mechanical engineer, I've essentially told you nothing about myself, because do I do fluids? Do I do structures? And even just saying structures, am I talking buildings, or am I talking robot structures? Am I talking mechanisms? Am I talking materials? All of these things can fit under mechanical engineering, and I'm just brushing the surface with that. So like, in a project, you will have people with all of these different backgrounds, and the goal is, how do I bring it together? How do I bring, this thing that I did in undergrad for a project? Can I mix that analysis, right? Because a lot of there are analogies between a lot of these different structures. So even if it's not exact, maybe the math, makes it so that you can say, hey, well, this equation works over here. It kind of represents the physics here, and try to put it together. That's hard for an undergraduate to do. But if you're if you're trying to take that leadership position, that's the kind of stuff that you need to start bringing to the table to really, solve the problems.
Yeah. So, Colin, I want to go back to something you said earlier, and I think it couples with what you've just said, and I think it ties into the question Mike asked. A few weeks back, someone told me, I don't want to be on your leadership roundtable because I'm not a leader. I'm just a salesperson. And I said, well, because you don't have a titled position of a leader, it doesn't make you not a leader. And I think that's an important reality is, leadership in any capacity is, anybody who's willing to be responsible and to look out for the people around them and offer guidance and support. And, it's kind of the essence of what we're doing here today. And I think, so Mike hit on or smiled at Alan talking about the Six Sigma and the black belt stuff. To me, it's a little bit of a foreign language for me because I'm definitely not an expert there. So I think that would definitely be something we would probably want to flesh out. And I was going to ask the two of you what your thoughts were about a PMP certificate, because I have found them to be, if you had asked me 8 months ago, I would have said, don't worry about it, it's a waste of time. But today I would say I think everyone should get a PMP certificate. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. Having that behind your name, it can be the differentiator between you getting promoted or the guy next to you or girl next to you getting promoted. And so the other thing I want to toss out is just some of the questions I have, looking at mentorship opportunities. What type of are there professional organizations that exist where folks can jump into? Podcasts, blogs, what tools are out there that you either use today or that you would recommend to someone? And Al, I know I cut you off before you got a chance to answer Mike's question, so I will shut up and hand the mic back to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot that you threw out there. So first of all, with regards to, I guess, working a little bit backwards in some of the stuff that you were asking. So with regards to the PMP, so I recently got a job. I was laid off for a few months. And during that time, I was looking at getting my PMP. I actually went out, I did a course, or I did the course on it to get the hours that I needed. I was studying for it, and then I got a job without having it. But it's not going to stop me from not going forward. Right now, I'm like in this transitionary period where, I mean, because I only started at the beginning of April, my new job. So, it's like I don't want to distract from that by focusing on the PMP. So it's kind of a balancing act that I'm going through right now. So, and plus there's like educational things that my company will pay for. So, one of the things that, like the test is expensive. And so it's like, okay, if they can help in subsidizing it, okay, I need to be there for so long before, those kind of educational benefits kick in. So I'm kind of waiting on that as well, but I'm still planning on doing that. I do find that there's benefit. I mean, yeah, I would say even 10 years ago, I remember asking somebody, hey, should I be looking at getting a PMP? And even then they were saying like, no, but when I was out doing my job searches, anybody who's looking for program managers, or not anybody, but a lot of companies, they're either, PMP required or PMP, strongly desired, or, you'll get preference, in an interview if you have that. I mean, they've specifically said that on that. So from that standpoint, yeah, it's definitely, I think it's definitely worthwhile in this day and age. Unfortunately, it's just like, and I don't want to go down the whole topic of, whether or not a college education is appropriate for everybody or not, but it's kind of it's just one more thing that, we out in the working world, need to pay for, to show our value, to an organization. And to me, it's a little frustrating, but at the same time, it's part of the game that needs to be played. And, it is what it is, unfortunately, or fortunately, because I mean, I will say I did learn a lot when I went through the courses. So I don't want to like totally, crap all over and saying, oh, well, it's just a racket. I mean, there were some things that I found of value, in going through the educational portion of it. But back to, Michael's question specifically, yeah, I mean, and even kind of a little bit what you were saying, John, with regards to, and what Cullen, being, it's definitely a Venn diagram of, leadership and manager. And, it's not, you can be a leader without being a manager. You can be a manager without being a leader. You're going to be a poor manager if you're not a leader also, but you can separate them, unfortunately. And I know people who have. Anyway, but so I guess one story I can say is, before I get into that, in order to be a leader, it's really going out and finding the things that aren't getting done. So it's a little bit of a, like what Cullen, what you were saying with regards to a gap analysis, but more, a gap analysis in the office. What is the stuff that's fallen through the cracks? And are you the person who is going to dig those things out of the cracks or make sure that plate doesn't fall? So an example for me, I was a 20-something kid working, and the company was going through a round of buyouts, and I from my manager, I received one of these buyouts, and I'm a 20-something year old. I mean, like 27 years old, I think at that time. Well, let's see. Yeah, about 27, 28 when this happened. And and it was the kick in the butt that I needed, really. Because it's like, okay, my boss does not see my value and sees that, whatever I'm doing is not, I'm not as much of a contributor as the others, because I know the others didn't get a buyout package and I did. And it was an optional thing. It's not like, it's not like a severance package. It was, hey, you can take this and leave the company and, this is what you'll get. I chose not to take it. But what I ended up doing was doing what I was saying, whereas I was like looking for what are the things that this team needs. That's how I got into Design for Six Sigma and going after the belt training for the green and the black belt that I got for that. I became, I picked up a lot of different things that nobody on the team was doing, but things that we needed to be doing. And I kind of basically recreated my role and of value. And when on the day that I put in my resignation, when I was leaving for another company, all of a sudden my boss is like, holy crap, there's all of these things that you're doing that now that you're gone, nobody has doing them. Nobody's going to be doing them. So he had to like all of a sudden struggle and figure out, who's going to take this on. And, and I was more than happy to help with the transition, everything. I'm not, it was no sour grapes when I left. But I went from somebody who my boss was like, I don't know what value you're providing, or, like to quote from Office Space, what is it that you do here? To somebody who became of value as a leader by taking on all of these responsibilities that nobody asked of me to do, but I just saw that they were there and picked them up and ran with it.
Al, I just want to pause there just for a second, because hearing everything that you said, I think this is one of those moments. I've called Mike out for this a few times, but there are mic drop, like not Mike, we wouldn't drop him, but like, mic drop moments where something so powerful is said. And I just want to circle back to it. That moment of clarity where you're smart enough to realize, okay, I have not shown my boss why I'm here. Like that's a hard moment for somebody it's a powerful moment when you're like, wow, they don't see my value. They don't see what I bring to the table. And then being able to turn that back around, like that's a powerful moment. And to be in your 20s and have that reality, I think most people in their 20s would have turned around, flipped them off and said, screw you, I'm going to take my value somewhere where they appreciate it. And instead you did just the opposite. You made yourself so valuable to the team. So number one, I want to applaud that, but I want to make sure that the people watching pick that up, that, we forget about that. we get so self-centered to the point of, what are you going to do for me? And I think that's a powerful leadership moment for somebody, especially so young, to be able to say, I've got to do something so that I can contribute here. And so I applaud you for that, Al. That's great.
Well, thank you. I mean, and just real quick to tie onto that. I mean, and honestly, I think that is some of the concerns that I have with like some of the interactions that I've had with folks on LinkedIn lately is that as either a hiring manager or a manager or a leader within an organization, it seems, and the feedback that I've received is it just seems like everything is so one-sided that on what is it that the employee is getting out of this? The employee, is feeling good about themselves. They have their safe spaces. They have all of this, it's all about the employee and the individual contributor and not about the contribution that people make to the company. And I think what got lost somewhere along the way in the individualism is that, the purpose is for everybody being in a place doing work is for the company as well. Because if the company doesn't succeed, you're not going to have a job. And vice versa. It's like if you don't treat your employees well, then, they're going to leave, and then you're not going to have a company that's going to exist because you can't get the right people in to help in producing and developing what you need to do. And it just somewhere along the way I feel like recently that's gotten, it's one-sided more so, and that, it really needs to look at, like I said, from a leadership standpoint, and again, as an individual contributor, not necessarily being a leader, in a executive leadership type role, is that you need to look at it from both sides. You can't just be like, well, to your point, what is it that I'm getting out of it? It needs to be a, for lack of a better term, a win-win solution where it's like, how are both sides playing off of each other to be successful together? It's not like a one or the other.
Yeah, Al, you're not alone. I will tell you that in all of the conversations I've had in the last 6 weeks with new clients coming on board, one of the big things that they're telling us is we want to find good people. Having the criteria to do the job is important, but that's what they're looking for. They're looking for people who will come on board and have that attitude because they're seeing it as well. I think they're seeing the shift in the workforce of it really has become, I hate to say it, but what, the selfie society where, they're just looking in the mirror saying, what have they done for me lately? And I think a lot of leaders are seeing now that the character of who they're hiring matters, and that the person comes with that skill set of being able to say, yeah, I'm important, but my contribution is more important. So,
right.
You talked about the expense of the PMP. I have no idea how much a PMP costs, but I know Mike had shared a couple shows ago a couple different ways that veterans can go about getting some of these certifications, and there's different organizations that they can go through where it's potentially covered. So, are you aware of? Obviously, the employer-sponsored stuff is the best path to go, but are there other maybe less expensive paths that a person can take to get certifications or get some credentials behind them? So they're building a good portfolio without breaking any secret laws, and then trying to get the training sponsored by the employer. But are you aware of any type of organizations or even I know LinkedIn has LinkedIn classes that people can take, but I mean, let's be honest, most of that is just you're just clicking through and listening to people talk. There's no certification really, except for the fact that you took the class. Can you guys shed any light on that?
So actually, a buddy of mine who also was part of the layoff that I was in back at the end of back in mid-December, he and I we're good friends, inside and outside of work. And, we've kind of talked a little bit, and it was funny or I find it was interesting that, he was actually a manager, and I didn't realize that he didn't have a degree at all. He went, from college and kind of like went the technician route, and kind of just eventually evolved into like a supervisor type, and then getting into a manager role. Very sharp guy, and he probably knows more engineering than I could ever hope to imagine. And it's just that's how he is. He's inquisitive and does all of the stuff. But anyway, one of the things that he's had issues with is the fact that, he's looking for these supervisory type roles still, and he doesn't have a degree. Well, one of the things that he found, and I think this is specifically a Michigan thing, but I know that to help him work on getting his degree, and I can't remember the name of the program off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up, and I can let you know. I can let you know after. But it's basically, because he's never gone and he never got his degree. There's actually some grant money and some things within the state of Michigan that is allowing him to start off at going through like a community college to get some of the basics under his belt, and then from there even going on to university, where it's all paid for under this grant money. And I really wish I could remember the name of it now, but it's basically for people who are later in life, and even not, well, I say later, but when I looked it up when he was telling me about it, it's, somebody who's like 21, 22, 23 years old, where, this money is available for people to use to go back and get their degrees or get some sort of certifications or, some of those benefits. So I know that there are some things out there. For me, I didn't know of any when I first started going through my stuff. It was all going to be out of pocket when I was looking at it more seriously. But it's just a matter of, trying to look around, and it may vary state by state.
Yeah. Now, Colin, you're in the DC area. To me, an outsider, I would assume that there are a plethora of opportunities because of just how congested that area is with humans. Are you aware of any programs there that someone could take advantage of?
It really depends on your industry. And like I said, if I say I'm a mechanical engineer, that tells you very little. There are professional organizations. A lot of them will have local chapters that know. For example, for mechanical engineers, there's the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. For electrical, there's the IEEE. There's a civil engineering, American Society of Civil Engineers, I think. Those local chapters will often have insights into where you can go. They often have training available there. In terms of certifications, again, it can really depend. Lean Six Sigma type training doesn't tend to matter much in the DoD space, from what I've seen. But like when I was in commercial, yeah, it was heavily pushed. I have my professional engineering license. In most of the spaces I'm in, I only know a couple mechanical engineers in the spaces that I'm in that bothered to get it, because it's generally not seen as a huge deal, and it's a pain to get, because you have to take the FE exam and then get a certain number of years under other licensed PEs and then take your PE exam, depending on the state. But yeah, so it's hard to give exact advice, but if you know what industry you're targeting, you should look and reach out to people on LinkedIn. I've actually had a bunch of so I do a lot of mentoring with both Rutgers and TCNJ, where I went to school, and I have students there go, hey, what do you suggest? Well, what do you want to do? It matters. And I've had people on LinkedIn just message me and say, hey, what do you think? I'm generally happy to, spend an hour either going over a resume or, chatting like this, kind of, and saying, hey, let me give you some advice from, my 15 years in the industry. So like, again, don't just go and decide that there's a certification that you need and just go and get it regardless. It may not do anything for you. You need to make sure that it's something that your niche really wants.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that is. Go ahead, Mike.
I agree with Collins. I mean, don't go and get it. I mean, for me, like the reason I'm smiling is I just finished my Six Sigma yellow belt. That was the most miserable training I've ever had. I mean, very valuable, don't get me wrong, but it was just miserable. Um, Especially in my field because everything they're talking about Toyota.
Mhm.
I'm human services, hospitals, trying to relate Toyota and the efficiency of developing their engine and putting it together and managing that project.
Yeah, there are some assumptions in Six Sigma that hold in some places and don't in others. So
Yeah, but I mean
so
overall, yes, any of those, the PMP, which we talked about previously, the Six Sigma, which I'm working on now, it's and to go with what Colin said, neither of them are really relevant to my field, but I did it because it's relevant to my aspirations. I want to be an efficient and effective leader. This is things that most places in my field don't even understand what a PMP is or what Six Sigma is.
Mm-hmm.
But when I get an interview and I explain what it is, it also triggers them to ask. I can differentiate myself as a leader in my field and different skill sets I bring in. To go with paying, some just general things, and Alan brought it up with state benefits. That triggered for me. A lot of places you can reach out to the unemployment office. For New York, it's called the Workforce One. And if you're unemployed, there might be programs to help cover those costs, those trainings, and like that to help get you back in the workforce, as well as get you job coaching and preferential treatment for interviews. I know in New York State, I don't know if they still have it, but when we were coming out of the pandemic, there was all sorts of tax credits for hiring somebody that was coming through Workforce One. Stuff like that. Then you also have, I think, kind of what Alan was talking about. Your state TAP tuition assistance programs, which do help with stuff like that. You do have in New York State, at least, you have for the elderly, 55 and older, programs that help get that stuff. It's called the Milestones program in New York, but programs to help you to get back into the workforce and get those trainings if you're 55 and older. Then if you have any disabilities, now understanding that depression alone is a disability. It doesn't have to be you can't work disability. There's things like Access VR. That in New York State, that's what it's called, but it's disability services that help people with mental health, physical disabilities, whatever it is, get the things they need to get back into the workforce. And it comes with career coaching, guidance, and again, preferential treatment because they get tax credits for hiring you. So going through these programs, but just looking at your state programs. And I mean, I would probably start out with, if you're not sure, call the unemployment office and say, hey, here's the situation. This is what I'm trying to do. Do you know of anything? Because no state wants a duplication of services. So unemployment doesn't want to provide services and pay for them that another portion of the city or state or a not-for-profit pays for. Right? So they're going to send you to these. They know all these people in the communities. They know the trainings, they know all these, and they can better guide you for your specific situation, state, county, city, whatever it might be. But I mean, those are just some other resources that are out there that are not like veteran specific, more to the general public.
Yep. Yeah. And so while you were talking, I was looking it up. I found the text from, it's called Michigan Reconnect is the program that he was doing. And then, from your standpoint, from an unemployment, one of the things you have to do when you go for unemployment here in Michigan, you do have to register through what's called Michigan Works. And that's where you have to post your resume and everything out like that. So yeah, and they do have some resources. I didn't leverage a whole lot of them because when I got my severance package, there was a company that they had us working with to help us with reemployment and kind of like getting back out there as well. So but those are the two that I'm aware of in Michigan.
So thank you for that, Mike. I appreciate that, those tips. So I want to shift gears a little bit. And because these shows are organic and we don't have a script, sometimes I pop things on people that they weren't expecting. So I'm going to go first on this, but I want to preface the three of you with this question. Um, the best thing that you ever did, class, certification, whatever, that has impacted your career, and then the worst or the dumbest or the biggest waste of time that you've done. I'll go first while you guys think about your answers. For me, the best thing that I ever did that changed the course of my career. I've talked about this before, and he's on that shelf behind me, and I'm wrapping up his most recent book right now, but John Maxwell. Exposing myself to John Maxwell's leadership style was, for me, the best thing ever because I was in my early 20s. I had just gotten out of the Army. I was going to school, had really no direction on where I wanted to land, what I wanted to do. And then his book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, it was $5. Literally, it was a book on cassette that tells you how many years ago or about what age I was. I bought it in a clearance bin because I had to drive back and forth about a 45-minute drive to another store that we were working out of. And it was, for me, best $5 I've ever spent in my life. And it kicked off a great, not quite 30 years, but probably the best last 25 years of my life from a leadership perspective. And then the dumbest or the worst thing, I should have thought about my own questions and the answers to them before I asked you guys to come up with it. I think for me, the worst or the dumbest thing I've ever done for my career was I had this crazy ass idea once that I was going to sell insurance, that I could do that. And I spent $1,000 for a class. And as I was working through this class, I started shadowing another insurance agent. And day one, we're out there just doing a variety of things, taking pictures of properties that were going to be insured. And then in this case, this company, he was taking a life insurance check to a widow. And it was by far the single worst experience I've ever had in my entire life. He handed the widow the life insurance check, and I was just like immediately pulled into all of her emotions. And I decided that day I am not going to be an insurance salesman because I don't ever want to do that. Just the pain and the grief that she was dealing with. So that's probably the worst mistake I made, was spending $1,000 for a class that I was like, I'm not going to do this. All right. So I'll ask for a volunteer who wants to go first.
I can go. You go, Colin.
Sure. So best things that I've done for my career. It's hard to narrow it to one. There are two kind of competing in my head at the moment. One is getting my PE license. It has been a differentiator and got me in the door a lot, even if I never actually stamp a drawing or anything like that. It's been a pretty amazing differentiator. The other one was getting my graduate certificate in creativity and change leadership. It introduced me to a lot of kind of the leadership research, how to bring creativity in, making it, engineering is a creative endeavor by definition. We just tend to forget that because we're so caught up in what we're doing, kind of circling back to what John said earlier, like engineering is making stuff possible. It's making that new technology. And so being able to bring kind of leadership and creativity into engineering was a big game changer for me. In terms of the worst thing, when I came in, when I first started in my career, I had this notion that like how hard I worked mattered. And so that sounds a little strange, but it also kind of gets back to some of the individualism we talked about before. Is if I'm burning myself alive for 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and I'm not producing output for the company, I'm just wasting my time. From my perspective, it looks like I'm working really, really hard and I feel it. From the company's perspective, what value am I bringing? So being able to kind of say, you know, the shift from I'm working hard so I deserve to be rated well to I here are the requirements, let's meet the requirements and then stop burning myself alive to get above and beyond. Let's meet what we need to do. Well, that was also a game changer, and I wasted so much time in my early career spending hours that the companies that I work for didn't even notice that I was doing.
Yeah, well, you know, I hate to dumb that down even more, but it's, you know, the old adage of working smarter. Yeah, that's a bitter pill to learn when you realize that you're doing all that and not producing value. That's crazy. All right, thank you, Colin. I appreciate that. Looks like you both are just super excited to go.
I can go. The best thing I've done for my career, I would have to say accepting mentorship, seeking and accepting and utilizing and being open to hearing where I'm wrong, what I could do better. That constructive criticism, as they say, I like to call it beneficial instruction. But just developing those relationships, and it's not just one. I don't have just one mentor. As we spoke a couple episodes ago, I got multiple mentors across multiple fields and multiple different levels of the programs. So that's benefited me the most in my career and helped guide me to where I am and develop me to who I am. And understanding it's not over. And then the worst. Oh, there's so many. I always have to say, the worst thing I've ever done career-wise, I guess would have to be to feel I should be acknowledged, or I have to be acknowledged, or I have to be seen. I've had more success working in shadows. So being that peer leader versus trying to get the supervisor to notice me and make me a leader. And things of that nature, you know, doing management through leadership versus managing as a manager. I would say that was probably, you know, because in the military, what we're taught, if you don't have medals for it, you didn't do well.
Mhm.
Right. So I took that in the civilian world and learned that if I just keep shooting to try to be acknowledged, I'm either a brown noser or, you know, spending more effort and time to get noticed than I am doing my job. To where if I just work in the shadows and do what I got to do, and like I brought up you know, taking on different responsibilities, like doing a report that's supposed to come up for my boss. Hey, I wanted to try this out. Tell me if I got it right. Right. Just doing stuff like that that's going to benefit him. I'm learning. Helping to train as a pair to my team. Like those things benefited me. So where otherwise, what am I trying to do my boss's job and send it to them so that they notice me? Right? No, my pairs hate me. You don't want to hire somebody that all their pairs hate them.
You know, it's interesting, Mike, because I think that ties back into what Alan shared earlier of, you know, the it's all about me kind of attitude. I think that's a powerful lesson right there. So, all right, Alan, you're on stage.
I've had plenty of time to think about it. I should have something, right? I would say, you know, probably the best thing I've ever done for my career is I found and it's a little bit of a misnomer of the name of the company, but it's called Manager Tools, and it's probably one of the best things I ever ran across. like they have a ton of podcasts on a whole bunch of different things about, helping people, become better managers, better leaders. I mean, they really focus on, and they actually have a side or another podcast called Career Tools. And so it just, so it helps those individual contributors as well as, as people who are becoming up and coming leaders, managers, and the like. And but they don't just focus on the management side. They do focus on, how it is you need to interact with your people and, interact with people and, and developing those relationships and all of that goes into it. And that's, to me, that has helped me so much in my career, not only when I was in a management type position, but also as, the individual contributor and how I can view the world and even help in understanding the perspective of my manager. As far as, how they're working and everything like that. So that to me has probably been one of the better things that I've had done, or that I've done in my career. Probably the worst is I took a job with a company that I was unsure of, like in the interview process, I'm like, I'm not really sure about this. Some of the people I interviewed with, something seemed off. And instead of listening to my gut, I'm like, okay, well, it's an opportunity, and like literally I sat at my desk day one and realized it was the biggest mistake I ever made. And it just, the company that I was working for, they were, and I don't know if they've changed, but at the time they were extremely toxic. And it was just a really bad environment, and I would come home mad and take it out on the family, and it was just a terrible experience that I had there. And it was just because I didn't listen to myself when I felt that something seemed off, and I still gave it a chance, and it's probably an opportunity I should have turned down versus trying to, stick it through.
I think, based on what I know, I think we can all relate to that, in one way or another. And I think there's a lot of people out there who make that mistake more than once. So, I think that's a valuable lesson, that, people, you have to listen to that gut instinct. It's not always wrong. So as we kind of circle up here at the end, I want to kind of put this out there that if you are a decision maker, an employer out there watching this, reach out to Cullen. He is on the job market. He is available. And there's other shows that Cullen has appeared in if you want to further vet his knowledge base. But I can tell you I've been interacting with Cullen now for over a year, and he's certainly a value add, I think, to any team. So, Cullen, anything you want to put out there for the world?
I appreciate that, John. No, I mean, like, part of why I do some of this stuff, part of why we engage is, like, I think that there's a crisis in engineering leadership at the moment. That so few, like, I watch my friends get these, management jobs, and they get, an hour or two sometimes of leadership training, and then they're just expected to do it without the recognition that, this is a separate role. This is new job responsibilities. It's different skills. And like, I think, like, we're engineers. We go, we work off first principles. What's the equation that does this? What are the assumptions in those equations that do this? And, like, all of that's there for leadership. We just need to, like, understand the models that are out there and use them appropriately. And we can get around, I think, a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the engineering world.
I agree. So as we wrap up, I want to thank everybody for watching. And Mike and I have put this out there before, but we're going to continue to put it out there. Feel free to add comments to this if you have questions for Alan or for Colin about engineering leadership or engineering career advice, and also put into comments anything you want to talk about in the future. So if there are show ideas that you're struggling with, we had the private session a couple weeks back, and it was I thought it was pretty beneficial. I think we walked out of that with a lot of feedback from folks that will never appear on the show. In fact, they didn't even turn their cameras on for that, which I was cool with, because I said, dial in if you want to. This is just not the environment for everybody, and I'm cool with that. But it's something I'm committed to. It's something Mike's committed to, of being able to move forward and offer some type of value add to people navigating their careers. Because sometimes people, as Colin mentioned, people don't get the right development opportunities through their profession, through their employer. I'm a big advocate for self-development. It is our responsibility to plan ahead, to think, where do I want to end up in 5 and 10 years, and what am I going to do today to get there? So thank you for watching. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you agreeing to come on the show. I hope everybody has a phenomenal rest of the day. Oh, and I'll throw this out there because this show will actually go live today. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there tomorrow.